Hello, and welcome to the Why podcast from London Business School, where faculty talk about their research and what it means for you, business, and society. I'm your host, Katie Pisa, and for this episode, I am delighted to be joined by Gillian Ku, Professor of Organisational Behaviour and Chair of the Organisational Behaviour Faculty here at London Business School. Her internationally recognized research is in negotiations, decision-making, and interpersonal relationships. Gillian, thanks for joining me today.
Very excited to be here.
Gillian, along with her colleagues, has just published a paper which will serve as a crucial component to today's discussion, which is a study on how Black employees can feel more comfortable expressing their racial identity at work and how social uncertainty is a key factor that discourages Black employees from expressing their social identity. In today's episode, we will be asking, why can't we be ourselves at work? And I feel that the research Gillian and her colleagues have done will provide many answers to that big question.
I hope so.
So Gillian, I'm really looking forward to discussing these important questions with you surrounding identity at work, safety, authenticity, empathy, and inclusivity. But I want to begin by asking how this piece of research came about. What prompted this study?
That's a really great question. I think we became interested in this idea partly because of a series of interviews that my colleagues did with Black employees. And this is something that is to some extent known already in the literature, but these interviews really brought these ideas to life for us. And what was happening in these interviews is that we were getting these Black employees to tell us about their stories at work and how it is that they felt or did not feel comfortable revealing their social identities, right? So being authentic and kind of like showing up and being able to say, this is who I am, and this is my heritage, and this is my background. And some people felt very comfortable doing that, and some people did not feel very comfortable doing so. And listening to their stories really allowed us to start digging into both their experiences as well as what we know in the literature to start understanding why that might be happening, right? So at the very core of this experience, different literatures have looked at different types of variables to explain it. They talk about how it is that there's very unfortunate negative stereotypes associated with Black individuals, and that's a reason why Black employees may not feel comfortable being authentic in the workplace. They talk about how it is that there are power and status differences. All of this is for sure true, but we try to really focus in on the psychological experience of these Black employees. And kind of there was the light bulb moment was when we kind of said, hang on a second, for these Black employees, it's really filled with a lot of social uncertainty with regards to whether they can be authentic in the workplace or not, right? So by social uncertainty, I mean this idea of like, hang on, if I do X, how are the people around me going to react? You know, how are they going to, if I'm authentic, are they going to be like, oh, that's amazing, that's wonderful? Or are they going to actually go, well, that's not okay, that's not allowed in this environment? And this nugget, this psychological sort of like experience of social certainty or social uncertainty really became the sort of like centerpiece of our research.
Did it take years and years to do this research? I always ask my guests. I mean,
yes,
how
years
long?
and years to do this research. The project started before COVID, and it was published last December. Last autumn. Let's just put it that way. And the really funny thing that I tell both PhD students as well as my colleagues, we within the subject area within our department, when we have publications, we share this good news with our colleagues, and it usually goes through the department chair, which ironically is me. So there's a bit of a weirdness of me sort of like promoting my own research. But I sent out the email and I said, This publication, I think, took 5 rounds of back and forth with the editorial team at the journal before it was accepted. So it was quite the process.
Can I ask you a few other questions? What are, going back to your thesis here, what are some common reasons people feel they need to hide parts of themselves at work?
Yeah, very good. So, if we step back for a second and think about our own experiences, right? So when we're in an organization, what makes us feel comfortable about being ourselves and what makes us not feel comfortable? Well, for one thing, very often we just need to, we all feel the need to fit in, right? With the group of people, with the organization, with the team, whatever that might be. So this is need to fit in. But I think because we focus on the experiences of Black employees, there's an additional layer of complexity for Black employees. As I kind of alluded to, there's all these negative stereotypes associated with Black individuals and Black people, which is incredibly unfortunate. But that means that for somebody who is Black, when they're in an organization, whether they act in a way that is authentic, they might also then be afraid of highlighting these negative stereotypes that are associated with them. The implications of this are plentiful, right? And they're not necessarily positive implications, right? So there could be knock-on effects of the interpersonal relationship that they have with the other party. There could be knock-on effects in terms of their profession, right? So all of a sudden they're being judged according to these stereotypes and in a negative way that impedes their ability to be successful in their careers. So all of this is sort of like weighing on Black employees in addition to this sort of like general, hey, how do I fit into a group? Should I try and be more like everybody else, or should I be who I am? So this dilemma is particularly salient, I think, for Black employees.
Absolutely. And how does this suppression impact the performance, relationships, and really importantly, their well-being?
Yeah. So again, we just, step aside for a second and think about our own experiences, right? So when we behave in an inauthentic fashion, or if we behave in a way that is not fully authentic, you are right. You're sort of like suppressing some part of yourself. And that is very taxing. It's wearing on the individual. And you're sort of also like spending a lot of energy constantly trying to figure out, should I do this or should I do that? Can I say this or can I say that? And we know from a lot of other research, pre-existing research, that has negative implications on people's well-being. It has negative implications on relationships. And perhaps unsurprisingly, it then has knock-on effects on things like performance and how, committed a person is to an organization and all these kinds of variables. So there's a large literature on how it is that being authentic in a workplace is actually hugely beneficial to both individuals as well as to organizations. It also allows somebody to sort of like have a clearer, more confident sense of who they are when they can be authentic in the workplace.
Can we just back this up a little bit? Because I know it's probably a silly question to you, but for me, as a person who doesn't do research...
no silly questions.
Can we just go back to, can you define what being authentic or authenticity in the workplace actually is?
Very, very fair. In general, people talk about it in different ways, right? So authenticity might just be able to be sort of like if you feel a negative emotion, being able to express that negative emotion. For us, we define it really around, because we're interested in Black employees, their ability to highlight or downplay their social identities, right? So the fact that they have, Black is their race, to what extent are they able to sort of like talk about that, highlight that, express that, versus sort of downplay and suppress it?
So can you share an example of someone embracing their authentic self and how it changed their work environment?
So there's lots of different stories from the interviews that we did, and you're absolutely right that there is definitely the sense that if you're able to be authentic, that can have all sorts of positive downstream consequences. So we have stories of how it is that some employees felt that they could or could not wear their hair naturally. We have stories about how some Black employees felt that they could listen to the music that they wanted to listen to, as opposed to if they were giving a lift or a ride to a colleague, they felt that they had to switch the radio channel to something that was less prototypically associated with the Black community. And what we found in these interviews and these qualitative data is that when people felt that they could be themselves, there were all of these like positive knock-on effects. They felt more committed to their organization. They wanted to be there. They wanted to put in that sort of like extra effort to do well in their organization. And as the literature would suggest, right, there isn't the sense of I just need to get out of here. I just want to do my job and leave, or I just don't want to be here at all. I just wanted to switch to a different organization. So definitely, I think lots of positive benefits of being able to reveal and discuss openly their social identities.
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense. Why is reducing social uncertainty such a critical part of creating inclusive workplaces? For a lot of the reasons you've just discussed.
Yeah. But I think the reason why we really think is an interesting construct, a theoretical construct to focus on, is because it takes all of these different pieces of literature from the past and summarizes it and distills it into one construct that we can then work on. Meaning, if you understand that social certainty or social uncertainty is a root cause of why people feel comfortable or not comfortable disclosing their identities, then you fix that rather than trying to fix things around the periphery. So for us, that was this aha moment, together with I think the incredible benefit of being able to say, actually, let's stop focusing on things around status and power, which are incredibly, useful ways to think about the problems at hand, but to think about the experience of the people who are trying to be authentic at work. What is that like? And we focus on that, then again, you can start thinking about ways to mitigate social uncertainty, right? So a lot of the paper was focused actually around saying, yes, once we distill it to this construct, how can we then consider different types of interventions to help Black employees feel more comfortable disclosing and highlighting their social identities at work?
That's a hugely interesting setup to the issues which many face at work regarding being their authentic self, and how that reduction in social uncertainty is not only a critical part of workplace culture, but also for an organization's success. I want to turn how organizations that foster authenticity climates and create environments where employees feel comfortable expressing themselves freely, which includes their racial identity. What does an authenticity climate look like in practice?
Great. I think your point is spot on. Right. Once we identified that social uncertainty was the nugget, right, the sort of like the psychological mechanism behind why people do not feel comfortable disclosing their social identities, we started looking at different interventions. One of which was this idea of authenticity climates, and an authenticity climate is exactly what it sounds like, a climate. So a sort of like shared set of beliefs and experiences that it is okay to be authentic in the workplace, that it is okay to talk about who you are, what you feel, your background at the workplace. And what we hypothesized and found is that in climates that are high in authenticity, they allow Black employees to feel less social uncertainty, or they feel more social certainty. And as a result of that, they then are able to reveal more of themselves at work.
So you're going to get your best employee, obviously, if they're feeling comfortable and authentic.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And, the interesting thing about authenticity climates and why it works, or why we hypothesize that it works, is that first and foremost, here's literally a sort of like set of expectations and shared beliefs of it is okay for you, for me, to tell the rest of our colleagues about who we are. It is safe for you to do that. But in this idea of saying it is safe for you and me, it all of a sudden doesn't make it about an intervention that is just directed at one group of employees. It is an intervention that is directed at everybody. So as a Black employee, first and foremost, I get a message of, yes, it's okay. I can be who I am. I can highlight who I am. But then I look around and I see that my other colleagues are also behaving in ways that are revealing who they are and bringing their sort of like social identities to work. And when I see that, it further clarifies that it's safe for me to do the same thing. So that's why we think these authenticity climates are quite a powerful way to allow people to be their true selves at work.
So it seems to me that everybody, no matter where their background is from, is going to feel comfortable, therefore benefiting everybody overall.
Exactly.
Can you share a story of how a supportive environment transformed someone's personal or professional journey? And did you find in your research a great example of, or outside of your research maybe, but...
Yeah. So I think that, one of the things, if I back up for a second, because I think this is an interesting sort of like detail. When we started out looking at authenticity climates, we were able to look at pre-existing literature that is measures, right, through sort of like a survey, how authentic is the climate at your organization. And so we could, quantitatively find these relationships that we spoke about. But in the back of our heads, we were still going, but what does an authentic climate look like, right? It's like, I'm still kind of flummoxed as to what does that really mean? Mm-hmm. So this is when we did this additional research where we asked people these open-ended questions where we say, think about a time when you were in an organization where they allowed you to be authentic, where the climate allowed you to be authentic, and tell us what that was like. And for a separate group of people, we said, think about a time when you were in an organization where the climate didn't allow you to be authentic, and tell us what that was like. So we had all of this data, and then we engaged in a thematic coding process, right, where we are looking at, what can we see as themes of what it means to be in an authentic climate and what it means to be in a not authentic climate. Mm-hmm. And what we found is that in climates where there was high authenticity, first and foremost, the Black employees just said, I feel comfortable sort of like talking about my racial identity, and I feel comfortable disclosing information. I don't think that when I talk about my racial identity, people are going to use stereotypes to judge me. So really, really great. And we also saw elements of how it is, and this is a really important part from a sort of like a leadership perspective, of how organizations and leaders played a role in creating these authentic climates, in that in high authenticity climates, our Black respondents were basically saying, look, the leaders were facilitating these conversations around social identity in a very sort of like empathic, genuine fashion that made me feel comfortable talking about my racial identity. And similarly, the organizations had policies that allowed employees to feel more comfortable talking about their racial identities, right? So if you start from the angle of what can leaders and organizations do? Yes, they can establish climates that encourage authenticity. And then from our stories, we saw that this literally resulted in employees feeling more certain. Okay, I know for sure that I can do this. I know that I'm not going to get punished, or there's not going to be any backlash as a result of talking about who I am and bringing information about my culture and my background. And as a result of that, we then saw that they felt more engaged in the organization, more involved in the organization.
Are there companies who have gained sort of popularity because people know that they are encouraging this?
Fair question. I can't say that I do know. What I can say is that our data were collected from a lot of different people from different organizations and different industries. There are pros and cons to that. The pro, obviously, is that it is more representative, and therefore we can feel more confident in our data and our findings. The con is that I can't answer your question and say, I know this organization.
You can't say the tech industry is better than something else.
Yeah, unfortunately, no. Yeah.
Okay.
And in fact, I don't think we did those analyses because it would result in such a thin slicing of the data that it's no longer clear that you can make conclusions from such a small sample. But as a result of that, I don't think we can make those kinds of statements.
Fair enough. We would love to hear from you, our audience. How do you think organizations and their leaders can create environments where employees can feel comfortable expressing their authentic selves? You can let us know by commenting below if you are watching, or via our Facebook, LinkedIn, and X channels using the hashtag #TheWhy. So, Gillian, it's really intriguing to hear how these concepts transcend not only work settings, but also give us perspective in our day-to-day lives, in our social circles, and interactions with our wider communities. I would like to discuss the power of perspective taking in developing authentic relationships. What is meant by
perspective taking? Yeah. So perspective taking is, honestly, exactly what it sounds like. It is you putting yourself in my shoes, walking a mile in my footsteps, trying to see the world from my vantage point, right? So there's a lot of literature around how that can be extremely beneficial in interpersonal relationships, in reducing intergroup conflict, in reducing stereotyping and prejudice. And we were building off of this literature. And in particular, a few minutes ago, we were talking about how it is that authenticity climates that allow you to be who you are and be true to yourself and bring your social identity out at work, how that allows Black employees to reduce the social uncertainty that they experience around how they should act, and to therefore increase the likelihood that they will be authentic at work. And what we hypothesized and found is that for Black employees who engage in perspective taking, this actually enhances this relationship between authenticity climates and being authentic. And there are a couple of interesting things to sort of like point out with regards to this, right? So if you think about it, we were talking about an organizational level intervention with regards to authenticity climates. And we think that's a really important thing to focus on. What is it that leaders and organizations can do? But at the same time, we wanted to empower Black employees to say, hey, there's something that you can do too. Not something that is your responsibility to do, but something that empowers them to walk this dilemma with a little bit more confidence. And we thought about this perspective-taking literature. And given that, we talked about social certainty and social uncertainty as being the nugget, the psychological experience of what it is that Black employees are going through, we were also depending on very recent research on how it is that perspective taking decreases social uncertainty. So you can see all of it sort of like coming together. You have authenticity climates, which reduce social uncertainty. You have perspective taking on the part of Black employees, which further reduces social uncertainty. And this all leads to good things with them being able to be who they are and, highlight their social identities at work. And then the positive downstream consequences with their sort of like involvement and engagement at work.
So why is perspective taking such a powerful tool for building trust and understanding?
So we think that perspective taking is so powerful because it really is something that allows you to decrease your social uncertainty, right? It goes back to this idea of how it is that social uncertainty is a sort of like psychological problem, the psychological mechanism for why it is that Black employees don't feel comfortable revealing and sort of like highlighting their social identities. So when you bring perspective taking into the picture, it allows them to better understand how other people are going to act and react when they are authentic in the workplace. And so this then allows a situation where perspective taking enhances the positive effects of authenticity climates.
Can you give an example of how perspective taking resolved a workplace conflict or strengthened a relationship?
Absolutely. I think that, perspective taking is hugely important when it comes to employees as well as leaders sort of like trying to navigate environments in the workplace, right? So let's say that you are in an organization, somebody says something, you're not very sure if it was meant to be sort of like taking you down. You're not sure if they were after your job. And one of the things that we know from the literature on perspective taking is that there's a lot of benefit of you putting yourself in somebody else's shoes to understand why they might be saying this, where are they coming from? And immediately that starts to help you find ways to resolve the conflict that you might be in.
Is perspective taking something that
naturally happens?
Naturally happens.
Yeah, great question. So we know that it is, people do perspective take to varying degrees. So in our various studies, we try to look at this perspective taking in different ways. In some of our studies, we simply measured it. We asked individuals, the extent to which they took the perspective of their white majority colleagues, because we're looking at Black employees here, and people answered as they would, right? So some individuals did it a lot, and some people's didn't do very much. But one of the reasons why I love studying perspective taking is that it is something that is quite easy to teach people to do, right? So literally in our other studies, we manipulated perspective taking. By that, I mean, we asked participants to think about what their white colleagues might be experiencing, thinking in these interactions, right? So in a simple way of just saying, think about it, write about it for a little bit, we are able to create this perspective taking. So this translates in a very sort of easy way to what it is that individuals can do, meaning if I naturally don't really take other people's perspective, I can just remember, hang on a second, rather than getting upset at a colleague or rather than being confused by how they're going to act or react to something that I do, I can try and put myself in their shoes. Mm-hmm. What do their worldviews look like? How is it that they are walking through the day? What are they thinking and why are they thinking that? And that can give me a lot of insight that allows me to have more confidence in my actions.
Are there leaders that you feel get this more strongly than others? Did you see in your research that some people are, I don't want to say ahead of the game, but they've embraced this more quickly than other leaders?
Again, I don't think our research was designed in a way that we were looking at specific individuals. But, there has been some other research, not mine, where we see differences in who is more likely to take the perspective of individuals. Women are more likely to take the perspective of others than are men, as an example. Another sort of like variable that we know matters is power. So if you're in a high power position and you are able to control resources, over other people, we know that high power people are less likely to take the perspective of other individuals.
So does that mean we need to maybe train them better?
I think that is exactly right, right? So, especially as we think about leaders have power. And your position or their position of power decreases the likelihood that they will think about other people's perspectives. And it therefore becomes beneficial for leaders to keep that in mind and to actively engage in perspective taking so that they can better understand employees, colleagues, external stakeholders, all of the above.
Do you feel that looking back historically, there have been improvements, and there's still a long way to go, I imagine, but have you seen a lot of progress in this area, even from the time you started your research to now? Have there been positive changes?
With regards to perspective taking?
Yes.
I think that the interesting ideas around perspective taking have historically been developed within psychology. And research has begun to translate its effects in organizational settings and organizational context, right? So anything related to sort of like teamwork, negotiations, conflict resolution, all of these have been happening or continue to happen. And I think that there's been an increasing push to recognize the benefits of perspective taking in organizational context beyond what we know from the sort of psychology literature. I should mention that perspective taking isn't all good stuff. It's not all good news, okay? It's and let me.
Why is that? Yeah,
let me
you're confusing me now.
What we know from a sort of like an accumulating body of more recent research is that perspective taking can result in you being more cooperative, can result in more helping behavior, can result in you being sort of like more generous. But these are in contexts where the interaction partner has good intentions towards you. Mm-hmm. in contexts where the interaction partner has more malevolent intentions, all of a sudden, perspective taking takes on a more fight fire with fire attitude, right? So people, perspective takers in competitive contexts might be less ethical. They might be less giving, less helpful, all of those kinds of things. My colleagues and I have actually argued that an early view of perspective taking was that it was geared towards creating sort of like social bonds and helping people to coordinate behavior. In our not so recent paper at this point, it's 2015, I want to say, time flies, is that this, our argument is actually that perspective taking is more, it is really a tool that helps you to navigate a mixed motive world. So when you are dealing with a friend, it helps you to build bonds. It helps you to approach that individual. It helps you to be helpful towards that individual. But when you're interacting with somebody who is a foe, then all of a sudden perspective taking is actually much more geared towards protecting you and defending you so that you aren't being taken advantage of. So this is why, for me, perspective taking is a really interesting literature, because it's not just a sit by the campfire, kumbaya social skill. It's really a social skill that helps you to figure out how to navigate the world.
Well, it's fascinating talking to you. Really important and interesting work. And thank you for doing it.
Absolutely. Tons of fun.
So, Gillian, that was a fascinating insight into the value of authenticity in the workplace and the reduction of social uncertainty, an explanation of perspective taking and how that all is involved as well. And I suppose we're all on a journey throughout our personal and professional lives to better understand our colleagues and our peers as they have their own lived experiences. The more that we can build a society and workplace where there is acceptance and celebrate those differences, the better off we'll all be. And at the end of the day, that's what your research is looking at.
Absolutely. I think very much we want to be in a situation where we can allow individuals to not have this like horrible, bizarre experience of like, can I reveal who I really am, or am I going to somehow be punished for it, right? So we absolutely want people to be able to bring their true, authentic selves to work and to other relationships so that their well-being is enhanced, the relationships that they have are enhanced, and from an organizational sort of perspective, their performance is enhanced as well.
So it's an obvious win-win for both sides because, I mean, being happy at work means you're going to stay there longer. It means you're going to less absenteeism, just productive and happier all around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Gillian, for being here today and sharing your knowledge and all your wisdom on this really important topic. I think we all have some work to do in our professional and personal lives when it comes to a lot of these issues we've been discussing. And overall, all of us learning more and being more educated about social uncertainty and perspective taking will help everyone in the end. So I just want to thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you, our viewers, for watching. I want to ask you, have you ever felt you had to hide your true identity at work? What did it cost you, and how did it affect your work or relationships? And if you were in an environment where you felt completely safe being yourself, how would it change the way you work, lead, or live? We would love to hear your thoughts, questions, and opinions on today's subject, including your own insights on how authenticity and identity in the workplace has affected your business and your professional life, by commenting below or over on our LinkedIn, Facebook, and X pages using the hashtag #TheWhy. You can watch more episodes at www.london.edu/think/TheWhy podcast and on our YouTube channel, where you can click subscribe for instant updates on brand new content as soon as it's published. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Why podcast from the Think editorial team at London Business School.